Good morning, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Um, I love that intro, by the way. I know you see I'm dancing when we start, but I love that intro. Today is going to be a wonderful show because we are speaking to someone who right now is in the middle of the whole election process. So it's going to be great to hear about the business of politics and elections. Without further ado, I will introduce Jasmine Burney-Clark, the Consulting Director of Equal Ground.
Good morning. How are you?
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about the business of politics. You are a nonprofit organization, correct?
Yes, we are a 501c3 and a 501c4.
Okay. Tell me who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it. My name is Jasmine Burney-Clark. I am a Orlando, Florida native and founder of Equal Ground Education Fund and Equal Ground Action Fund. I am also the owner of Social Solutions Group LLC, and our Equal Ground is sort of a project of that entity. So we are a Black-led nonprofit, political nonprofit organization that focuses on registration, turnout, and education of Black voters along the I-4 corridor. This particular election cycle, we have expanded our work to include work in additional counties as far north as Escambia and as far south as Miami-Dade. We also work to ensure that Black folks are protected under the Voting Rights Act to ensure that they are not being targeted based on their race and ethnicity in order for folks to dilute or suppress their vote. So we help to make sure that we combat any election issues by helping to protect voters as they head to the polls this cycle.
Awesome. So you talked a little bit about, or you just said it initially, you are a 501c3 and a 501c4. What's the difference?
Yeah, so the difference is simply the tax status. 501c3, you can't do any explicit advocacy for or against issues or candidates. And with the 501c4, you can do express advocacy up to a certain limit of your organizational budget and time.
Okay. So we were talking a little earlier about, as a nonprofit, that's a very interesting dynamic, and it's much different from a for-profit because you sort of have to manage the business of two sides. There's that operational piece, the budgetary piece, the staffing piece, and then there are the dollars that are funneled into the communities that you serve. So that's always a struggle, I'm sure.
Yeah.
How have you been able to develop a strategy to best meet the needs of both entities?
So that's a great question. I don't operate this organization alone. I have a team of folks that work with me to help make some of the best budgetary decisions, whether that's projecting what our needs are or making planning ahead of time to determine what makes sense for the organization. But you're right, there is a balance of the work as we raise funds from different entities across the state. There are goals and there are obligations that come with those funds that we have to meet, and we can only meet them with paid staff time. And so a large portion of our budget goes to the administrative side of staffing folks in each of our counties. And then we also work to raise dollars that go directly into our communities, like our Souls to the Polls events or community canvases and community events. So we work to sort of raise funds for two different buckets at the same time, so that we are also infusing dollars into our staff, but then also helping to also infuse dollars economically into our communities that we want to be in close relationship and partnership with. And they sometimes aren't the same amount in those buckets, but we work to prioritize what makes sense for the organization, our communities, and our staff.
So when you receive funds from funders, as a for-profit, we're beholden to our stockholders. You're beholden to your funders. What are some of the mandates that are being put on you from these funders? Are they typically the same sort of fundamental requirements, or again, I'm sure it's in some way to make sure that they look good in a certain light. Are you
Mhm.
finding that they are similar, or
Yeah.
you you got some tricky stuff going on sometimes?
I mean, yeah, we sign contracts just like regular businesses do, as well. And in those contracts, you state that you have to provide a specific service within a specific frame of time.
Mhm.
We too are providing a service, but our service is a bit different in that we work to serve our communities. We work to serve and ensure that we have a certain amount of conversations that increase the interest of Black folks to get out and register to vote or turn out on election day. And so I think the mission is a bit different in our work, although, the same parameters still apply. Yes,
Okay.
funders want to look, good and make sure that their investment is one of the best investments, and we ensure that the work we're doing is one of the best investments. But for them, I think their give is one of a noble mindset, one of a philanthropic mindset. And so that is sort of the nature of how they look at the work, and that's how we look at the work as well. So it is a do good, feel good industry
Mhm.
that prioritizes people first and then bottom line later, where sometimes businesses are bottom line first and
Mhm.
people later.
Mhm.
That's sort of the difference in how we operate our work. We put our folks' needs first, and we put our community needs first in order to meet the needs of our donors. And we try to strike a balance that makes
Mhm.
sense. And so it comes a lot with motivating and prioritizing the needs of our team members, making sure that they feel lifted in this work, because that is it's hard work. It is hard work to talk to folks who in this environment are just not feeling the overwhelming urgency to get out and cast a ballot,
Yeah.
given what they know about our political institutions, how they've treated us historically, how we have been treated historically. And so we our work is certainly difficult in that nature, but
Mhm.
we again prioritize the needs of our team to make sure that we get it done.
Okay. You're nonpartisan?
Correct. We are nonpartisan, so we don't support for or against candidates or issues.
Okay. And so, as nonpartisan, are you able to identify funding and secure funding from both sides of the aisle?
Yep, we can identify funding from whatever entity we choose to, as long as their values align. And that is also another difference. We can be approached to receive funds from anyone, but do we accept all those funds is the question.
Mhm.
And so, no, we don't accept funds from everyone. I have been fortunate not to have to decline any support that we've received, because we have found that the folks who support us also have values that align with our organization. They prioritize Black folks. They
Right. Okay.
prioritize getting out the vote.
I mean, I mean, we have become that audience, and in
Mhm.
particular, African American women, we've become that audience that now the country and those in the electoral process recognize is very important.
Yeah.
As such, there's been a lot of money raised. I just
Mhm.
kind of quickly went to opensecrets.org, and they have sort of an election cycle fundraising. The Democratic Party, billion point three, I mean, yeah, 1.3 billion raised. The Republican Party, 1.4 billion. There's been a lot of money spent. Where those dollars go?
Yeah, that's a good question. And to think, that money is raised every election cycle in the state of Florida. And, they think of it as elections are just like a business. We have accountants that need to be hired, we have attorneys, we have marketing teams or graphic designers, digital,
Mhm.
especially this year, given the fact that we can't do a lot of face to face contact with people. We have made a huge and hard pivot to transition that work over to online. So there's Zoom that has to be paid for. But, gone are the days when I worked on my first campaign, there was no such thing as healthcare. There was no
Right.
such thing as paid time off. There was no such thing as maternity leave. We didn't have any of those types of benefits. And
Right.
as organizations' values started to change, so did our dollars start to change around how we spent them. So people pay for paid time off. We pay for healthcare benefits for our staff. We pay for, a living wage where we aren't paying folks minimum wage. Every single person on our team makes a minimum of $15 an hour
Very
and
nice.
up.
Very.
So those dollars are needed to pay folks to be able to live and do this work full time and not just cyclical. And so we're paying to, keep the operations of our offices open and, making sure that people have what they need to be able to do the work. As I've said before, is really
Mhm.
important. And what people need is healthcare. What people need is time off. What people need are tools to be successful. Some folks need internet to make that transition to be able to work from home. And
Right.
so that's sometimes a service that we provide. If we do decide to, help folks go out into the field, are we paying them hazard pay in the event
Right.
that something happens to them? Are we paying them to be able to cover the cost that they need to care for themselves if they have to be out of office? So that is where it goes. But then you think about events that are happening, like with us in Souls to the Polls. We're spending money with Black businesses in 24 counties across the state to put up stage, lighting,
Right.
deliver ice, entertainers. That is where a lot of these funds go to
Okay.
help infuse dollars back into the community.
So you talk about that minimum wage, and we're going to get to the business part, but that wasn't even one of my questions, but you tapped on. Um, when did you, or was it a part of your model when you first brought this online to really be intentional about supporting your staff in that way? And is that a model that you are trying to help other nonprofits sort of get their head around, also meeting the minimum wage, or what, not the legal minimum wage, but the intended hopeful future minimum wage?
Yeah.
Is that a conversation being had?
Yes, so that was definitely a part of my model when I started, was to pay folks at $15 an hour. Florida
Mhm.
currently has an amendment on the ballot right now that would raise minimum wage to $10 if it passed, and then $1 every single year after that, up to the $15 mark. But I am a part of a network of organizations, political nonprofits across the state of Florida, who are in agreement with each other that we pay folks at a minimum $15 an hour and other things that make up what a living wage looks like. So it was not a hard decision for us. We built it into a budget and fundraised based off of what we knew needed to happen for our teams.
Okay.
And, again, that's just the minimum. We have folks making, full-time
Right.
salaries at rates that are much higher. So we want to make sure that we support folks adequately to be able to do that. And so there's definitely no thought of creating a model that didn't support people with the living wage, when we also fight for issues that prioritize people, that we want to also have the same benefit. We need to be also practicing what we preach, if you will.
So how would you advise, not even only a nonprofit, but a for-profit that is, and by the way, I voted yes on that particular subject matter, because I agree. I live and subscribe to the idea that you do need to get people, and I live in Miami. That's just not easy. So how do you prepare people, or other nonprofits or organizations that you may work with, or what would you advise them to start to think about as they move toward this concept of minimum wage for their own staff, and ergo as they're fighting for those opportunities for those that they serve? What's the message?
Yeah, I mean, the message is, think about what this pandemic has done to our communities. Like, I'd start at thinking about the pandemic first, and how folks didn't have a nest egg to lean on. One
Absolutely.
day they were up and functioning, and literally a day shut down our entire country. And folks immediately lost their homes, immediately lost their ability to provide for themselves, immediately lost the ability to purchase food or basic necessary needs. But not only that, corporations also experienced that as well. There was
Mhm.
no savings account for corporate businesses, and I'm not here to support them, but what I'm saying is they can receive a bailout. Why can't folks be able to receive a minimum wage that is commensurate to the needs of our community that allows them to keep a bailout or a savings or a nest egg of some sort in the event that this happens again? So looking at it from that particular point, businesses should take into consideration the fact that they are they are helping to save workers who help function or help make their businesses function. One of the arguments was that, people are making more on unemployment that they are in their jobs.
And that's
if that is the argument, it shouldn't be strip folks of unemployment. It should be pay people what they're worth. Pay people a salary or an hourly rate that helps them sustain themselves, not the opposite of let's give them nothing at all so we can force them back into this laborious, in work environment. That's not the answer.
I agree.
And so go ahead.
I was going to say, and from the side of a business, I think you and I talked about this, the same thing. You are correct. The ecosystem is not really designed for you to be able to save for that rainy day. There's not even a real conversation around that. So as I mentioned, I was watching businesses 2 weeks into this pandemic who were on the verge of closing their doors. Like, we've got to ask ourselves, what aren't we doing right with regards to our people and our businesses that we can't sustain ourselves for longer than 2 weeks? That's not a proud moment.
No, it is not a proud moment. How are we again prioritizing people over profits?
Exactly.
And that's the question.
The statement that everyone is one paycheck away from poverty. That's not a good tagline. There's something wrong with that.
That is not. And I think it peels back the onion layers of where our country is and where it's headed. If a economic shutdown caused, so many people to be in a difficult position, we should be really rethinking how we operate and function businesses as a whole. But I can't say that without saying that a lot of elections are cyclical. When this election is over next week and we shut down, we aren't closing our doors permanently, but our funds only go so far.
Right.
How do we continue to raise and sustain? We're only a 1.5-year organization, so we are working to make sure that we raise and sustain ourselves year round, not just each cycle that comes around. So,
and how are you doing that? Because you mentioned November 4th will hit. Now what? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, I know. I just did payroll yesterday. We've got 95 employees on staff, and we're thinking about what's next. Yeah. We didn't think we'd get this far. We didn't think we'd have this many employees at this time. I was blown away with seeing the number yesterday. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, what is going out the door today? But no, it's good because it's showing up in the work, it's showing up in our community. But the reality is that we and donors who support this work support it up to a period of time. There is a finite end date, just like in a contract. The same as for us. Our agreement goes until a certain day. We know what our target date is, and that's election day. And after that, we are now going to continue to pound the pavement again to continue to raise funds as we go into the next year. After the election is when the real work begins. It's when the real accountability is there. How do we work with our elected leaders? How do we grapple with the new amendments that are happening? There's a legislative session that is getting ready to go in the month of March, and our legislators will be there for 2 months deciding on new laws and new initiatives. Then redistricting is happening. We had a census this year. They will now take those numbers and determine what the lines look like to determine our representation. Florida has the possibility of getting 2 new congressional members. Wow. There is so much work that still needs to be done, despite the fact that an election is over.
And again, going back to your funders, are there funders out there that will still invest in that work, or is it really sort around, I mean, the election is the Super Bowl of your work. So, how do you continue that message of the work still needs to be done? This was just a beginning.
Yeah, so we have funders who are committed to us for the long haul and committed to helping us keep the lights on year round. And we will go back and ask them to reinvest and go back and, continue to pound the pavement and ask for introductions to new supporters of this work. And out of each election, we do have sort of an emergence of new folks who want to make new investments and want to make new decisions about where they place their funds. And that's been the beautiful thing about winning and losing campaigns, unfortunately, is that a loss means that there's someone who said I could have done more and I didn't. So how do I do more the next time around? And then there are some folks who say, I did everything I could, but I still want to do more. How do I continue to reinvest? And so we lean on folks like that who really have that goodwill and heart to want to continue to give and see the best and success of Black voters.
So let's talk a little bit about Black business. I read your bio, you've been in the political world for a minute, even working with, I believe correctly, some elected officials. During election time, those quick conversations around we can help build small business. That just seems to be one of those words or one of those platform statements. I guess behind the scenes, what are some realistic conversations about how politicians, how politics can really serve the advancement of small businesses who are great employers at the end of the day? The purpose of elevating small businesses because they employ on a grassroots level. Are there real strong conversations around that, or is that just a platform statement?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that there are real conversations around how to support small and emerging businesses. There are candidates who have written full and extensive plans that point to real solutions. There are real bills that have been written and policies that protect small businesses, whether we agree or disagree with their protections. They keep small businesses in mind because those small businesses advocate for it. It's easy for me to say businesses need to be in the faces and in the ears and in the meetings of our elected officials. They need to know and hear from you because they oftentimes are not business owners. They're transitioning from careers to elected office. So they need to hear from folks who are actual experts and not lobbyists who are there on behalf of larger corporations. They need to hear from real small business owners and hear the real concerns that these businesses are bringing up so that they can then write policies that suit the needs of those people that they're hearing from. That's essentially how it is getting crafted. And that is how a lot of politicians craft their policies, based on the people they hear from. And based on the experiences that can be brought to them. So I would say it's definitely not lip service. They're definitely using what they're hearing from their constituents that are, business owners to craft and determine what the messaging and policies are. I was once told unfortunately, the squeaky wheel or the one that makes the most noise gets the most attention. They need to hear from Black businesses. They need to hear about what it looks like when around PPP loans. I know in Orange County, we went from a large number of white-led businesses receiving support from our county level government who received PPP payment, but they took a look at the data and saw that there weren't a lot of minority and Black and women business companies, went to their African American chambers and their Hispanic chambers and said, how do we support and or ensure that these applications get into their hands? What assistance does that look like? What additional needs and support does that help with? These are elected officials who did that. And by doing that, they can also determine what are in the future, what opportunities look like to help make sure that they don't wait last minute to go to Black and Hispanic businesses, that they do it from the beginning based on that experience. So again, it's not lip service. I truly believe folks want to help support small businesses. It's about hearing those real experiences though.
So we have to get in the game is basically
got to get in the game.
Like how corporate America does.
That's correct. Mhm.
That's very important to hear, actually, because I
Yeah.
don't think that, but it's a challenge. I mean, I own,
Mhm.
if you're a small business owner, a lot of times it's you or
Yeah.
it's you and a few other people. So you trying to get into the political game now may make your business fall. How do you,
Mhm.
how do you have those conversations or be in that place and space or make those connections and have those relationships in a very solid way, but stay alive?
I'll add to that and say, COVID has made access to spaces
Mhm.
so much more easier now than ever before. We can digitally be in meetings
Absolutely.
across this country in one day and get everything done.
And turn off the
Continue to
video and still do something else.
and still do something else and go to dinner at the end of the day and be like, I just helped lobby for a bill here and I didn't have to pack up the whole family to go up there to do that or pay anything. Small businesses continue to advocate for access,
Mhm.
keep virtual meetings available, keep the conference call meeting access available. There's no more of an excuse around, well, we can't do it, we can't figure it out, we don't have time, just come down. Nope, you actually did it. Let's keep that option going so my business of one can participate. So all of these small businesses of one can continue to participate.
Very,
And so
very good.
that's one of the things I'd say continue to lift up and do as we move into next year and things start to feel like normal, continue to advocate for access.
So you also mentioned earlier that you are intentional about
Yeah.
purchasing and working with Black businesses,
Hmm.
unapologetically. So, and I really do applaud that for sure. But is it enough?
Mm.
Is it enough for us to just invest in one another, which is never a bad thing?
Yeah.
Or have we got to figure out a way to get mainstream America to invest in us as well? And are
Hmm.
those conversations being had in the political arena as well?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I agree. It is more can always be done.
Mhm, mhm.
I predominantly all of my funders, with the exception of one, are white folks. Just gonna be honest. I've taken their white dollars and invested them in Black communities.
Right, right, right.
And they in turn have taken their dollars and invested in a Black-led organization that is only a year and a half old and saw great potential in the collective action of the leaders of this organization and the work that we've done collectively and our choice to invest in equal ground and bring our talents to this organization also helped with knowing that their investment was safe here with
Right,
us and that their investment in our work was powerful. But you know I would not have been able to do that had this not been a critical election year. And every election is critical. Every election is critical for different reasons. Some elections are critical because we really need Black folks to show up. But
right,
in the year and time where Black lives matter, um, and it's at the forefront, racial tensions are high, and corporations want to give. We need to be talking about what giving looks like multi-year, because I talked about that already, how funders give cyclically. What does it look like to give over the course of a few years? What does it look
yeah,
like to invest over the course of a few years? I've invested in 2020, but will they see those dollars and feel that effect in 2021 and 2022?
absolutely, absolutely.
And I believe that those conversations are being had, but we are in the middle of election, so they're probably not being had as deeply as we would love to. And we will probably be extremely tired and ready for a vacation when this election is over and not want to have any of those conversations. But we need to because, you
So,
know, buying is about to be up, Black Friday is about to be here. Like, how do we continue to still engage around what investing in Black businesses look like and whose responsibility that is? Whose
right,
responsibility is it to hold that mantle? I feel it's my responsibility to have brought in a substantial amount of money. I work with a coalition in Orange County where, we've been able to fiscally sponsor projects on their behalf because we have the entity and the mechanisms and the tools and the legal and the accounting set up to be able to do that. So that's
mhm,
another way that I'm looking at what long-term investment is, and that's being a fiscal sponsor on behalf of entities and nonprofits and individuals who don't have the structure set up. So that's set up.
Okay.
So that's what my long-term investment has really been focused on.
So, there's been sort of this conversation around it, definitely around election time. I think last year was the first time we really started to recognize that Black women, Black folks, but intentionally Black women are a powerhouse when it comes to the selection space. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of conversation around there are parties that only invest in us when it's time to vote.
Yeah.
So what strategies are being put into place after the election to really ensure that we remember the importance of serving the community that got you there, if you got there on that community. And even if that community didn't get you there, how you still going to serve them anyway?
Yeah. That is so good. That is so good, so right, so yes, so real, so right. As a Black woman who's been working in politics, Florida politics specifically, for 10 years, I can truly say that the investment has been lacking. I have seen so many Black women do this work in Florida and leave after a cycle because everything in them has been drained and taken from them, and we can't pour from empty cups.
Right.
So, and so what does it look like to be poured back into and then celebrated and given flowers and dollars?
Right.
I am very,
dollars is a whole nother conversation.
Dollars make a difference, and I am very clear about how I show up in this space. I can't and don't do this work. Like, social justice work is revolutionary, but it doesn't mean broke down and broken. I don't have time for that. Can't do that. Can't feed my family that way. I have a full mortgage. And there is a salary that comes along with everything that I touch and do. And that should not be looked at as selfish. It should be looked at as selfless, because I'm also putting myself on the front lines like other Black women are. And we should be paid to be accommodated for putting ourselves in harm's way, because there's also a risk of doing this work and showing up as a Black woman and leading and carrying an entire community on your back. And so we got to get more women talking about what they require financially, and not being afraid to do that in spaces where people think you may not deserve. Absolutely. When you are providing a service, like, we should also look at this as like a business as well. We require and deserve a certain amount of money to conduct a certain type of business, and this is what it costs, and people should be okay with it, not because I'm just a Black woman and you may or may not have seen me, but clearly you're coming to me with an expectation to get something done. There should be a price that comes along with that as well. Absolutely. And so I've been encouraging all the Black women I work with, who are on my team, who I am friends with, who I consult with, let's talk about how these dollars make sense, so you aren't broke down and broken when this election is over, and you can treat yourself to healthcare and a little vacation. Right.
Yes. And maybe even a little bit of yoga or meditation.
Yes. All the goodies. Yes.
This is not bad. Actually, it was funny. I was just talking to a guest Tuesday, who was really also about, we as a population of African-American women have to really know our value in this space called business. So when you are asking your price or setting your price, you're making sure that you're not only providing for yourself, but your staff, in the same way that if you worked in corporate America, they don't ask for any less than what their value is. So why are we always in this dynamic? So, it will be interesting to see after this election what those conversations look like, and what those conversations look like in real dollars and cents that are reinvested in the community in a way that's really going to be about wealth building, be it as an individual or a business owner. And I would imagine that your organization is going to be very key in helping to make sure those conversations get to the right entity.
Absolutely. We are definitely making sure that they get to the right places. We see congressional members come in at a certain salary and come out millionaires. There's some real wealth building happening there.
on my vote.
Yeah, yeah, and on the backs of Black and brown folks in
Exactly.
communities. So,
Exactly. And you never saw any of it come back into the community.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So you touched on it a little earlier. There are some challenges sometimes in our communities when you're talking about getting out the vote.
mm-hmm,
There are probably some people who are very apprehensive,
mm-hmm.
maybe even apathetic about, this is not going to serve me.
Yeah.
So what are the points that we as African American voters, how can you tell us what happens with our vote? Why is it so important for us to vote? How does it affect us directly?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There are so many ways to look at this, but there are two ways in particular I've been looking at it and talking to people about it. And the first way is we elected a man, or people elected a man in office who, with the swipe of a pen, was able to tell you when you could and couldn't leave your home, when you could and could not go to work, how you could and could not enter the world because of a disease that has killed over 200,000 people that he takes no responsibility for and doesn't prioritize the health of folks, but is trying to shut down and take away our health care in the
Right.
middle of a national pandemic.
Right.
He is an
Right.
elected officer, which
Right.
means that he can be placed in there and given this power with election votes, or he can be removed and that power be taken away
Right.
with votes.
Right.
The
Right.
second way to think about how powerful your vote is and how the best way to use it is to show up at the polls with accountability.
Mhm.
Accountability will be on the ballot because we would not be subjected to people who don't have the same empathy, sympathy, and life experiences that we had by killing Black folks if they weren't given the same exact power by way
Mhm.
of votes. Our
Mhm. Mhm.
our state attorneys, our
Mhm.
judges, they are elected officials who have been given power by means of us electing them in office, and that power can be removed by us
Mhm.
unelecting them and electing folks who identify with our needs and have our best needs at heart. So when you go to the ballot box, think about what accountability looks like, and it looks like voting for and against someone you may or may not agree with based on your own values and interests. That is how powerful your vote is. That is how your vote should be used. That is how seriously it should be taken.
I think about myself. I've been a voter for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but when I first, right, fresh out of college, that's not important. And I remembered actually when I started to get into this voting thing, I would only vote in the national elections. And I had someone literally say to me, your local vote is probably voting locally in these interim votes. Those are the folks that have a more immediate impact on your life.
Yeah.
You would have thought he hit me in my face. Like it just never occurred to me that,
Yeah.
wow, this is true. I really need to be a voice in that space, because if I don't, this person can, as you say, with a sign of a pen, write away all of my rights and
Yeah.
opportunities. And if we're not in the game, we won't know.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, I'm very grateful for that statement for sure.
Absolutely.
Think that's it. I am very excited. This is a very exciting time, a
It
very
is.
scary time.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
do believe we are voting for our lives. Um, let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Before we leave, I definitely want to. Well, let me ask you this. I did forget to ask you this. Two quick things. Were you able to benefit from the grants and the loans from the pandemic?
I did not apply. I use discernment to make a lot of decisions. And something about that process did not lead me to apply for those funds. And
Mhm.
in hindsight, I'm glad I did not. We have actually probably benefited more greatly from the support we've received than from that. And I, sat back and thought, well, am I going to regret this? And I don't. So
Good.
I was not led to do that.
Yeah, I think so. I've talked to some people, many of who are recipients, me being one of them. We're like, was that a good idea? That might have been. And then when I was talking a little earlier about the monies that are raised for elections, I'm looking at this sheet that says debts. What happens if you have debts? How are those debts paid on November 4th and you don't have any more money?
Mm,
These are really good.
yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. But I mean, that's where we are no different. When you sign a year-long lease, you
Mhm.
know that you need to budget and have funds in the bank for a year-long lease. With that comes lights and internet and insurance. So we've made budget decisions that sustain us for the time frame we need to be sustained for. We also make sure we place funds in savings that make sense for the work that we're doing. There's always, after, even when the election is over, we now have to write reports.
Right.
And everyone can't turn the lights on or off on November 4th. We have to keep some funds back to sustain some staff to help write those reports about and tell the story about the work that we did. So just like with any business, we project for the year and raise for the year and make sure that those dollars are in there for the year that we're working in.
And so basically, if I'm looking at this form and I'm seeing that there are debts and there's no cash on hand, that's just bad money management.
That is bad money management. You don't want to be in that position when it is all said and done.
Right.
Yeah.
Because not
And
only is
I
somebody owes that money.
Yes, and I'm someone who looks at the finances on a weekly basis. I need to know, see what's going in and what's going out. And all right, I think we're good to see another week of this. Let's keep going.
When we get to a problem where we don't see it, we'll have to talk about it.
Yes, yes.
So before you go, if you can tell us how we can find you.
Yes, so folks can find us online at our website, equal-ground.com. There you'll find our C3 and our C4 website. You can also find us on Instagram at equal.ground and then on Facebook at Equal Ground Education. We're going to work to get all of that, under one handle soon, but for right now, it is working for us. So just follow us on each of those platforms as we head into these final 5 days of the election cycle.
So yes, we have a visitor, Tracy, who noted 95 employees. That's a good problem to have. I agree with her. So you're doing something right. You're doing something
Thank
right.
you.
Thank
Thank
you again
you.
for joining us and kind of helping us break down and unpack the importance of managing such an important organization, especially during times like this. I know I've always been intrigued, so I hope our guests were as well. Thank you. By the way, we're doing a happy hour on Friday with all women. This
Oh.
is Small Business Women's Month. It's virtual. So we're trying to stay safe. We don't have
Yeah.
any problems. So if you can join us, we'd love it if you could, because we want to start to try to see if we can create a community of folks that help support one another, very similar to what you're doing with your organization.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for this space. I appreciate it. It is unlike a lot of the conversations I have, so it's a great break to have this chat today. Thank you.
Look, and I know you got some work to do. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your
Have
day.
a great day. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Again, I knew that was going to be a great conversation considering the time that we're in today. I learned a lot. I think it's important that you do go vote. I know this doesn't have anything to do with talking business, but it is imperative you go vote. And this is an organization that wants to make sure that we are participating in our civic rights, we're civically engaged, and we understand the power we have. That is a very important investment. There's monetary investment put into that, as well as the power of the mindset to know that you have power in your vote. So thank you. Again, we're going to have a happy hour, and we are welcoming and inviting in Tracy. We hope you'll join us on Friday at 6:00 virtual. I would love to be able to have our women. It's a ladies' night out. Not that we don't love the men, and we do interview men, but it is National Women's Small Business Month. That's a mouthful. So we want to celebrate and appreciate and love on our women and our women entrepreneurs. On Monday, right before the election, we decided we're not going to have a show on the elections next week because there's going to be a lot going on, and I don't want to interfere with anybody going to the polls. So on the 2nd, which is Monday, in Miami-Dade County, that is actually not an early voting day. Early voting ends on that Sunday the 1st. We will have Dwight Bullard and Katia St. Fleur, who will also join us to have some conversations around the business of elections. Please join us at 10 a.m. And again, if you can join us, please reach out to us on Talking Business if you're interested in joining us for the happy hour on Friday. Thank you and have a great day.